Welcome to In the News for November 8th, 2024. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hey, Brett.
Good morning, Jeff. It's been a little bit of a week here in the United States. Pretty much just everybody that I have spoken with is a little stressed out. Kind of the unknown, what's happening, whichever side of the fence that you may fall on. So I was so thrilled this morning, Jeff, when I looked at In the News. This was like you provided a little respite for folks coming, that wanted to just kind of forget everything going on in the world. You provided your top 30 favorite Apple TV Plus shows of all time. And I just love this. And in fact, it just reminded me several times of like, oh, we started watching that, but we need to finish that. Or I put another one on my list for me and my wife. It's like, hey, this weekend, here are some great ways just to kind of get away from it all, but sit on the couch in my own house on this. So thank you for sharing this list today, Jeff.
What's funny is that when I decided to put together this list, I still think of Apple TV Plus as like the new kid on the block, the brand new one. And so I'm like, I'll make like a top 10 list. And as I started doing it, I'm like, oh, well, I want to include this one too. It's like, okay, it'll be a top 20. Right. And the next thing you know, I could not believe that I got to 30 and there was still like more that arguably could have gone on there. Yes, Apple TV Plus is relatively new, but they have been around long enough now that the library of original things that they have is actually very impressive. So
as compared to like Netflix or Amazon Prime or Max,
obviously
that have been around for years and years. Yeah.
And they have a lot more. I mean, you're never going to complete. But then there's quality versus quality. Do you need 10,000 shows if you're going to only have time to watch, X?
Right.
So and for goodness sake, if you were starting now and you had all 30 of these to go through, that would be a lot of time of some really, really good shows. So anyway, so what do you think? I'm curious what you think. Like, let's sort of go through it and you see which ones have you not seen, I start with Ted Lasso at the top. I think that's just an all-time favorite.
Of course.
I mean, it's one of the few shows I watched, especially that first season, all the way through, and then I watched it all the way through a second time with my wife and enjoyed it just as much a second time.
You got to stop right there because no matter what, I've seen a lot of, some people are really negative on Ted Lasso. It's like too, a little bit over the top. But man, what probably one of the best ways just to kind of get out of your life and just be a little bit more on the positive side. I mean,
feel
the
good.
show isn't all, bed of roses and everything, but the show is just so good. I don't know. It's just even thinking about it, even saying the phrase Ted Lasso just brings a little bit of a smile to my face. And so I am glad that you put that at the top. I know some people, say, again, it's a little bit over the top, but anyway, I'm just glad you put that.
And they have a new season coming out that they apparently have just starting to get together the cast for. I mean, I'm sure it's a year or two away, but there's going to be even more Ted Lasso coming in the future, which is great to know. So.
Excellent stuff. For All Mankind, I know you put that as your second. You're a huge fan. I started it just on my own. It was something I didn't think that my wife was so much interested in. And I got to tell you, I keep thinking about it every once in a while. And you've said this, like it does take a while for it to get, getting a little started and kind of having the ball roll a little bit. I'll have to come back to that.
I love it.
Then you put Severance on there. I haven't done that. We tried the first show, and then we got distracted from something else. You still like that a lot, though.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you haven't seen it yet because I know that that you enjoy sci-fi, dystopian futures, that sort of stuff, and that's what this one has got a lot of that in it. But this is a great time to start Severance because the new season is coming out, I think, in January. So it's always nice to sort of catch the first season and then be with everybody else in the second season. So anyone that hasn't watched that one yet, this is a great time of year to watch it.
Slow Horses, number 4. Love that. Guys, have you started has the new season started yet? Oh, man.
Yeah.
I got a lot to catch up on this weekend, Jeff.
Yeah, the latest one is out. And what I like about Slow Horses is that there's so many seasons. I think, if my numbers are correct, that we've just finished watching season 4, and they've already have the next one like made and about to come out. I lose track, but it's one of these things that seasons of that show come out a lot faster than other shows. And I think they actually film 2 seasons at a time. It's been great if you enjoy James Bondy type stuff, but of course it's James Bond from the opposite extreme because instead of the incredibly professional and perfect spy, it's the opposite.
The anti-James Bond,
just barely spies, and yet it's funny, it's exciting, it's adventurous, it's great stuff.
And then you, at the very end of your show, of your post today, you mentioned Silo. You put that as your number 5 favorite top because the second season is getting ready to come out. And You and I were just talking briefly right before we started recording, and I'm just so excited. I still have that last scene of season one burned into my brain, and I'm like, I want you to start right from there. Like, what happened next? What happened next? And of course, they're just brilliant at doing that because they know that's what people are going to tune in for.
Yeah, and you reminded me before we started pressing the record button today that there was a really well-loved book series that led to the show, which is often true for so many of these
Yes,
good TV
that's
shows,
right.
is they have great source material. And I know that that's one of the sci-fi to great ones. So yeah, first season of Silo was fantastic. We're days away. I may have to rewatch the last episode of season one again just to get myself mentally excited and prepared to watch that second season.
It's
So
almost like previously on Silo. You go back
yeah.
and go back and remind. Well, that's your top five. We have 25 more to go. I don't know if we can
Yeah,
go
we
through
won't
all
go,
of
won't
these,
go
but
through all of them, but there's a good,
yeah.
I'm reminded by just the next one on the list, Dark Matter, that, and, looking down further foundations and stuff like
Oh,
that.
yeah,
Apple has
that's
been
good
particularly good.
too.
If you like sci-fi, there've been some great stuff there. Quite a
Yeah.
few comedies, Lessons in Chemistry, number 14 on the list. I don't know if you've seen that one. I really enjoyed that one. It was
No,
well done.
really?
I tell you,
Okay.
that's a really enjoyable, well done, well acted period piece. Just so
I
many
like your
good ones
number
on the list.
15 right after that. Schmigadoon. Although I got to tell you, that first season was great. I feel like that they tried a little too hard on that second season there,
Yeah,
but
I
that's
am.
another like just a feel good, rip roaringly fun. Like get your mind off of all things serious and have a lot of fun with that. That was a good one.
If you like musical comedies, that one's great. And Schmigadoon makes me a little upset. I agree that season two wasn't as good. My understanding is they had a season three planned and even like wrote some of the songs
Yeah,
for it, but Apple
yeah,
canceled it, and so it's too
yeah.
bad that it's not to be. But the first season is great fun. So many fun ones on here, even as you go down to the end. So that's a great list to get people started on for shows. It's just
The
oh,
other one, you got this down at the bottom, Masters of the Air. I'm a huge fan of the Band of Brothers and then the Pacific series. Both of those were just so good. And this is sort
mhm.
of like the third, like this is, whereas Band of Brothers was over in Europe and Pacific, obviously in the Pacific theater, but Masters of the Air is obviously focusing on, well, I haven't watched it all. You have,
Mhm.
but I just know this has got to be so good, right? I mean, this still
Yeah.
involves like Tom Hanks and some of those folks, right, that were just really interested in wanting to tell the story as accurately as possible from World War II. And wow, that's just really
Yeah, it's a
good
good one.
on there.
Right here in New Orleans, where I live, we have the National World War II Museum.
Oh
And when
yes,
my son and I finished watching Masters of the Air, like we went to go to the museum the next weekend just because you could see, like in real life, these huge, incredible planes that were, actually in
absolutely.
World War II. And it was fun to like see in real life the stuff that we had seen the movie mock-ups of, on television. So that's a really fun one. And again, if you remember the amazing Band of Brothers way back when on HBO, this is of the
Yeah.
same ilk. Good stuff.
You linked to another story from Ryan Christoffel at 9 to 5 Mac. Bad Sisters season 2. That was a good show. I like the Bad Sisters. I don't know how they're. I feel like that's another one. Like, hey, just leave it at that one season because it was just so good. And you wrapped everything up. But it remains to be seen, right? How good this will be for season 2.
Yeah, Bad Sisters is one that I wasn't even sure I was going to like. My wife said she was going to watch it, and I'm like, okay, well, let me give it a shot. And then once I started, I'm
Try
like,
it.
oh, this is really funny. Like it was
I
really,
know.
really well
Yeah.
done. And some great
Well
characters in
done.
it. So yeah. So again, we'll see what season two is.
And and this other one that he mentions here is Blitz. I don't remember. Do you even have that on your list, or have you seen, or is this a
Well,
new
this
one
one, so
coming
this
out?
will be
Oh,
brand
this is the
new.
movie.
So
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
it's a period piece. It's a drama. It's, we've got the little description here about a boy separated with his mother and stuff like that.
Oh,
I don't know, but I
interesting.
mean, sometimes Apple has had some pieces like this that they have done. Some of which have bigger, like amazing hits, and then some of them not so much. I don't know which ones this one's going to be, but the production value looks really good on it. So,
Well, that just reminds me. You were talking. We've mentioned Napoleon, like the Napoleon movie, which I still haven't seen the whole thing, which is unfortunate. But like that was supposed to be such a huge blockbuster, and I think it just kind of died on the vine a little bit, even though it just looks spectacular from the trailers that I've seen.
yeah, in fact, I had forgotten Napoleon when I did that list, so that just shows how
Right.
imperfect it is. I Napoleon was not great, but the story, it was good enough, and
Yeah.
the watching it was just majestic. I mean, it's, I will give a movie some props if it's just, the plot's okay, but it's just fun to watch because you take so much in. So now I need to figure out I got to redo that list and figure out where to put Napoleon on it. So it just shows that there's so many good choices.
The last one here is maybe, we're talking about a lot of the comedies, we're talking about the sci-fi, but there's some very serious, I guess you could call them documentaries in sort of a wide aspect. It's
Hmm.
Bread and Roses. We talked about this last week or a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
where it's just focusing on the Taliban coming to power and how women are continuing to fight for their rights over there. This looks extremely powerful, this documentary
Yeah.
here. And there's several of these like this that Apple, I think, has done such a really, really good job on.
Yeah, and that one's going to be interesting because I mean you don't see videos and stuff of real life in Afghanistan very often, so I'm sure it's going to be sobering and probably hard to watch. But I'm gonna when I get my brain in the right frame point, it will not be this
Exactly.
weekend. That is that's definitely one that'll be interesting to watch.
Exactly. This weekend is the
Good
fun
thing it's
stuff,
not out
right?
yet. So
Right, exactly. Well, you gave yourself a little bit of an out in your post. I like this, Jeff. He's like, if you ask me tomorrow, there might be a little bit of a different, a different order here, because then you even mentioned like three or four other movies or series after that,
mhm.
like you didn't even include in your top 30. But anyway, thanks for putting that together. And it just like I made sure I put some things on my list. Like, okay, honey, we're just gonna sit and kind of like couch surf over the weekend. It'll be good. Let's go from movies and shows to photos. You actually texted me, I remember this week, because there was some news that I don't know that anybody sort of expected, although looking back on it now, it was like, well, this makes a lot of sense. There is had been a beloved software app called Pixelmator, or I think Photomator, right, on the iPad or iOS. Pixelmator I have used on my Mac as basically a high-end replacement for something like Adobe's Lightroom or Photoshop. I mean, it has really been an independent blockbuster app for so long in the Apple world, and so good that Apple bought it this past week.
Mhm.
So Pixelmator is now going to be coming under the Apple umbrella, and I really liked this story you linked to from William Gallagher about what's going to happen, because that's the first question that all of us had. What's going to happen to Pixelmator now?
Yeah, I had texted you last week because I'm pretty sure we had talked about Pixelmator on last week's show, and like just as
I
soon
think
as we
so.
stopped recording, the announcement came out. So it's interesting. Pixelmator is an they're a great Mac Apple company because like
Yes.
they
Yes.
use the Apple technology when new versions of the iOS come out, or the Mac OS come out. They're always one of the first companies to take advantage of those new features. They're very Apple-like apps. The one on the iPad that I mean, I use the computer as well, but I love my iPad. And for the iPad, it used to be called Pixelmator Pro. It changed its name to Photomator, but it
Okay.
is
Okay.
really good in terms of editing and stuff. There's one or two things. I also have Photoshop, and there's one or two things on my iPad that will use Photoshop for, like just some very few features, like the dehaze feature. And there's a few things that they have that are unique for now, but most of what I need to do if I'm editing an old photo, Photomator is good, and it's far beyond what you can do in just the regular Photos app. So that
Right.
begs the question: what is Apple going to do here? You know, the worst case scenario for me and for many others, and William Gallagher talks about it in this article, would be what they call the acqui-hire, which is Apple buys a small company just because they
Right.
want those employees working for them, and they'll have a deal that like you got to work for us for X number of years before your shares vest. You
Right.
know,
Right.
some way to encourage the employees to stay there. I guess it'd be always the end result could be good for users if there's smart, more good, smart people working for Apple. But I would hate for
Hmm.
these apps, which are so good on both the Mac and the iPhone and the iPad, to wither on the vine. So my hope is that it's going to be more like, the other extreme is, years ago when Apple purchased what is now Final Cut Pro, or what is now the
Yep.
Logic, or
Right.
another more recent example is when they purchased the Workflows app and called it, and
That's
now of
right.
course it's
Shortcuts.
Shortcut.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
those things have flourished and done well under Apple's stewardship.
True.
So there's this range that you have through history, and only Apple knows what they have in mind for this acquisition. But my
Right.
real hope is that in a year or two, we'll look back and say, this was good. Like this helped users overall. Like we get better stuff. I'm fine if they want to take it. On the Mac, for example, Apple used to have a high end graphics program called Aperture, and then they decided to get out of that business. It was
Oh,
sort of
that's
a Lightroom
right.
competitor,
Okay.
and they got out.
Okay.
So my hope is that they'll say,
Yeah.
we're going to once again have a high end. I also, because I'm so focused on the iPhone and the iPad, I would love to see even more. Some people have speculated we have
Yeah.
Photos. Might Apple release another app called Photos Pro, or maybe they'll keep the Mixomator or the Photomator
Oh,
name.
yeah.
Um,
Right.
but I don't care what they call it, as long as we have those same features, so that
Just give us the
keep
tools.
keep Photos. Photos is the good app that's for the general public, but give those people that want to have the power to go to the next level without necessarily having something that's, so confusing and fiddly and
Right,
stuff,
right.
to keep that. So I'm incredibly interested to see what's going to happen here.
It makes sense to me because it made me think of the fact that, yeah, Apple doesn't actually have a full featured photo editing app. Now, I had forgotten sort of about Aperture on there, but for the most part, for the vast majority of people, if you go into the Photos app now, either on the Mac or the iPhone or anything, there are some basic editing tools, right, that are built into the Photos app. Like you can change some kind of filters, you can crop things. In fact, I just used today. It was amazing. I went in and used a photo today, and I used the the cleanup tool. And actually on my Mac, it had to download the actual tools, and so it could help, and it was able to clean up. But there are some very, very basic editing components and features and tools built into the Photos app, but Apple hasn't had that separate app to do that, because that's when we turn to Pixelmator, or most people would, on their professional end, turn to Adobe Photoshop. And so once I started thinking about that, I'm like, well, that makes so much sense. Like, I'm glad that they went with something that was so beloved in the Apple ecosystem that, yeah, let's see what they do. But I also quickly loved, you alluded to some of this. William Gallagher goes through some of the other apps like Dark Sky, which was a fantastic app standing on its own, just like you were talking about workflows. Dark Sky was bought by Apple, and then he says it was subsumed into the Weather app, which we have today, which I love. Like, we all loved the Dark Sky. Workflows was great as a standalone app. Apple bought it, put it into shortcuts. And then I love this third one here. He talked about Prime Phonic, which a lot of people don't know, but it was a fantastic standalone classical music app. Apple purchased it, and then they came out with their own Apple Classical app. I think that's what it's called, right? Is Apple Classical Music now. It's a separate app from the Apple Music app. Although recently I've seen that I can still access the classical music in the Apple Music app, even if I played it in the classical app. Anyway, just interesting how they're kind of working on that. But
just to mention Prime Phonic, since you mentioned it, that's an interesting example because I don't remember the dates off the top of my head, but Apple purchased Prime Phonic. Let's see if it says in this article here.
Yeah,
it purchased it in 2021, and for a long time, I mean, it was over a year. Nothing, for those of us in the outside world, we saw nothing. And a bunch of us like, why did they do that?
Right.
And, classical music wasn't the top of the list of things I think about every day. So I didn't really, but it was curious that nothing happened. And then finally, I guess it was in 2023, that's when they released the app called Apple Music Classical. And then we could see the fruit of their efforts. And I think that now it's better than it ever was. It's got the Apple support. So that's an example of it, people that love Prime Phonic ultimately got something good. They just had to wait. And so curious if the same thing we're going to see here. We have this purchase, this acquisition in the end of 2024. It may be that all of calendar year 2025, we might not hear anything about it. And maybe in 2026, we'll see something. And as long as they keep the existing apps going, perhaps they're not going to get us new features as quickly as before. But, maybe that's okay. But, in the longer term, hopefully this is for the good. So I think that's an interesting example too.
Hopefully it won't be that long in 2020. I want to see something soon, because this story from Arin Waichulis, I think, in 9 to 5 Mac, the best iPhone 16 Pro pictures I've seen yet. Thanks for linking to this, because we've seen some of these, like, sponsored by National Geographic or the Audubon Society, right? But I just loved, like, 9 to 5 Mac just said, hey, readers, send in some of your favorite iPhone pictures. These are like from amateurs, and these are fantastic photos. I love that you posted some of this today.
Yeah. And, these were all taken with the latest and greatest iPhone, and a few of them take advantage of some of those features, but others just remind you that, like, a great picture, I mean, you could use, a horrible camera and still take a great picture just because of the moment that you capture or something like that.
Right.
But these are all fun pictures. And again, what I loved about it was the same. I love the one that you just showed, the angles and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, it just shows, though, that, yes, like you say, you can have the professional photographers submit these prize-winning photos, but just people responding to a website, everyone's got their photos that are really good. Hopefully you and I, if I looked hard enough, I might have some photos in my collection that might arguably be possibly almost good enough for one of these contests, but it's fun to see these things. I love it.
I say keep doing this 9 to 5 Mac. I love this. Like I
Indeed.
just love this. Like the common man that, like us, like who aren't professional photographers. Like you're right. We do have some good things every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe sometime soon those photos can go through space in Apple satellites. Great story here. We've talked about this so much because I continue to get very excited about Apple's continued expansion into utilizing satellites for text messaging. Certainly started out more as like an emergency, access to emergency services, which brilliant, fantastic. But it's like, hey, if we could do it for emergency services, we certainly, I don't want to clog up the channels, for that, but could we do text messages? Could we make phone calls even through satellite? So I'm not having to worry about like what towers that I'm around. And that might be several years off into the distance, but you reported on a story today close to you about Apple expands Globalstar relationship to support growing satellite services. Good stuff here.
And what fascinates me about this story is that Apple now has, an investment in Globalstar. They've increased their contract to purchase more services, but they also now have a 20% ownership in the company. Now, part of that could just be defensive because Apple has, they've spent the time and effort to put the features in the new iPhones that they can communicate via satellite so that if you're in the middle of nowhere, you can get help or just text a friend, hey, look at me, I'm in the middle of nowhere. That's good. And maybe they're just worried that, like, if they didn't make this investment, another company, maybe, Elon Musk's SpaceX might decide to purchase them and stop selling to Apple. So there could be just be a defensive thing. But what gives me sort of some excitement is that maybe it's not just defensive purpose. Maybe Apple actually has something interesting in mind to do with satellite as an alternative way to communicate. And again, I don't know what it is because it seems like as long as you're in an area that has cell phone coverage, it's or Wi-Fi, it seems like that would be so much better than anything that a satellite could provide. But maybe I'm just not being creative enough. Maybe for now, maybe there is something in the future that I don't know about, but that the really smart satellite people do know about, that this is going to be a big deal and it's going to allow for some additional features. Not to mention there may be areas of the world. I mean, Apple, again, is a global company. I mean, in a suburban city, in a big city like where I live, everything's fine. But this may be part of Apple's play for other parts of the world that maybe don't have the service that we have. I don't know, but I suspect it could just be this defensive play, but maybe there's something more. And, it could be years before we find out what that is, but it just is really interesting to me that there might be some more here that I'm not understanding. But you don't spend that much. I know Apple's got tons of money, but this is a lot of money they're spending here, and you wouldn't do it unless you had some real specific goals.
I'm a dreamer, Jeff. I'm a dreamer. I remember back in the early days when we started having cellular phone calls. You remember that, right? I mean, it was touch and go. You were lucky if you got a signal. We started off with, 2G. I mean, it was just so bad. And look where we have come now. It's been several years, of course, obviously. But I just feel like we're at the very beginning, like what it would used to be in the early cellular days. And it's like, if we can continue to build up a little bit more on the satellite side, I would just love to not be reliant on earthly bound towers. I mean, first of all, they don't look great all the time. And there's just so many all the time. And it's just like, I dream of the day to where I don't have to be tethered or worry about, I don't have to worry about the buildings. Now, there's so much that goes into that, of course, and trees, and I know the Global Link and the Starlink, issues and stuff like that. But it just push forward, guys. Let's keep going. More satellites. I like it. But while we are here on Earth, we still have CarPlay, and thank you for that. I have to say, I have been using CarPlay. When I saw this story today from Ryan Christoffel in 9 to 5 Mac, I have been using Siri in CarPlay, and I am liking it a little bit more. Not just the newer voice, like what he talks about in this article, but I feel like it has been a little more responsive. I don't know. Maybe it's just I feel like maybe it's just a new iOS, but especially in CarPlay is where I've noticed it a little bit better. It's like, hey, thank you. Like you actually heard me and you did what I asked. And so I'm glad that I'm not alone looking at this article.
Yeah, I mean, you would hope that as the iOS continues to improve and the underlying CarPlay technology improves, that it would get better in lots of different ways. But better or not, it's certainly different. I mean, I noticed that whenever iOS 18.1 came out, it was, a couple
Right.
days later, I'm in my car and I just said, hey, you know who, and here's my question. And when I heard the response, like I suddenly realized it's like, wait a minute, there's a new person in the car with. I mean, I know that voice of
Who
CarPlay,
is that?
and it's a little
Right.
tweak that's a little different. And
Just
and
a little.
Apple's what was Apple's words? It's more natural, expressive, and clear. I guess so. I mean, it was a
Yes.
fine voice. I'm not complaining about it. It's just I suddenly noticed that somebody slightly different was talking to me, and then it also has some of those the series special effects they have where it sort of makes your screen
The
glow and
glow
stuff like
up.
that.
I like
So
it. I'm
yeah.
liking
So
it. We talked about this
it's
before. Like it could get old, and I know that. But right now, I love it. Like when I do it inside CarPlay, I just love that the whole screen goes whoom,
mhm.
and then it has that little glow around. Like I feel like I can see that even a little bit easier than that little glowing orb that used to be at the bottom. I don't know. For me, it just seems like it's being a little more responsive. Maybe I'm just starry eyed right now, but so far I've been liking it. Apple Intelligence is what's driving a lot of that. And Jason Snell, one of our favorite journalists, was writing about where is Apple Intelligence AI going next? In other words, what other devices could it be going to? We just are at the very beginning of it, seeing how it's implemented in our iPhones mostly. But I've seen it sort of a little bit on my Mac and how it's coming into play there. But Jason talks about, what about the Apple TV? What about the Apple Watch? I like this. Jason's a dreamer
Mhm.
too, and I like that.
Yeah. Right now, one of the things we've seen is that to use Apple Intelligence, you have to have more RAM than Apple had typically
A
put
lot
in
of
a lot of
power,
devices. When
right?
Apple came out with its new computers this week, it was, one of the interesting things is they even went back to I think I have my facts right in this, the MacBook Air, which they have not improved in the last couple of weeks, but they did go back
Mm-hmm.
to the lowest model and raise the memory without any additional increase in cost from 8 gigs to 16 gigs so that now they can say, all the MacBooks, even the MacBook Air that's not brand new, it will
Right,
support Apple Intelligence. So, with
right,
that in
right.
mind, we don't have 16 gigs in things, certainly in an Apple Watch or,
Like an Apple
other
Watch, right?
devices. But at
That's
some
right.
point, RAM does eventually get, come down in price in the future. And so eventually we will get to a point where all other devices can have the memory necessary and whatever the processors necessary. And where else might be Apple Intelligence be useful? The most obvious one for me is the HomePod, and of course there's a rumor out there that Apple is
Yeah,
working on something that's going to be it's a HomePod speaker, but it's going to have a screen on it too, like some of the
right,
Amazon
right.
Echoes and
We talked
stuff.
about that.
And
Yep.
who knows when that will come out if it comes out next year. But that would be something that maybe they would want to put the processing power. And I could see, a time that you're in your house and you want to ask a question that's a little bit more sophisticated, that you would want to have not just the traditional Siri response, but an AI Siri response. One day I guess it could be in the Apple Watch. I don't know. It's interesting to see. I'm not sure I see a reason for it on the Apple TV as much. But the thing about
Yeah,
the Apple TV is a very powerful device that can do a lot of different
that's
things.
right.
But most of us, me included, just use it to watch shows. I mean, I know that I
Correct.
can
Right,
play games on my Apple TV. I
right.
could
Other
run
apps.
apps,
Mm-hmm.
but I really don't do it that often. I really just use it as my television box. So I don't know that I need Apple Intelligence, but I'm sure that Apple has big plans to bring Apple Intelligence everywhere they can. So it's interesting to sort of speculate about this stuff.
The last item he put here was AirPods, and like I'm trying to wrap
Hmm.
my head around that. Like, really, could it be an AirPods? But boy, that would certainly make sense. I mean, it had to be a lot of power to pack into the little thing, but that would be nice. He did not mention the Vision Pro, however, and I
Hmm.
feel like that could be another area. But
Yeah.
Jason Snell also did talk about a couple of accessories for the Vision Pro, and I don't even have a Vision Pro. But I got excited about these accessories. I wondered how much you liked it. These are from Belkin, which again is another fantastic company that does all kinds of accessories for Apple products.
Okay. There's two interesting aspects of this story. Let me talk
Okay.
about aspect number one is just the products themselves. The products are it's a strap that goes over your head and it's a travel case. Just
Okay.
standing alone,
Nice.
those sound like nice ideas. Apple
Sure.
sells a case with the Apple Vision Pro. I purchased it. It was ridiculously overpriced. I think it was $200. But I figured that
What?
maybe it'd be really good and worth it. Whatever. I
Sure.
have it. If I had to redo that purchase today, I would not have spent that money on it because there are third parties that make other things that are smaller and easier to travel with. And now we have the
Hmm.
Belkin product, which Jason says is excellent. So that's something that, I just didn't know at the time. I decided to get the Apple product for the case, and this looks like a better idea. And then the strap is something, I personally don't have a problem when I wear the solo loop around the back of my head. I find that the Apple Vision Pro stays on my face just fine. That's just because of, I guess, the shape of my head or whatever. But I
Okay.
know that some people say that it can get some fatigue on their head over time and that they really prefer something to give additional support. And this is an interesting way to have a strap over your head. So, on its merit, these products look like nice things for Apple Vision Pro owners, period. Second reason this is interesting, though, and this is really the reason I linked to it today, is there have been many times over history where Apple has wanted to have, at least this is me speculating a little bit, but Jason has the same
Okay.
speculation.
Good.
I believe that Apple has wanted to have a product available for purchase, such as an accessory, but for whatever reason, they have decided, you know what? This doesn't feel like an Apple product. Like we do sell
Oh,
accessories.
okay.
We sell keyboards, we sell mice, we sell things, we sell trackpads, but like some things are like, you know what, that doesn't seem like something we would sell. Let's have somebody else sell it. And if you look over time, I think back to, for example, the Apple Pencil, which is, we all love the Apple Pencil, but years ago, Apple wanted to have a low cost Apple Pencil compatible device. And they teamed up with Logitech, and I am convinced that they told Logitech, here's what they want you to do. And Logitech made the Logitech Crayon, and it was half the
Okay.
price. It was
Yeah.
much more affordable for schools. It doesn't have some of the features, but it's an object that Apple wanted to have out there. They just didn't want to be the ones that sold it. And so they worked closely with them to do it. And I have the feeling that this is
Interesting.
the same case
Okay.
here because when we first saw the
Oh.
previews of the Apple Vision Pro and select members of the press went to Apple's campus and tried out the preview product months before it was available to actually purchase. Everybody had the strap in the back, just like Apple's selling,
Right.
but they also had an over the head strap. And they weren't allowed to take pictures of things at the time. They just described the experience. And it was curious that when Apple released the product, although they did release that second, there's a second strand, which is different, but they didn't release the same strap configuration that people had used. And I'm like, I wonder why Apple
Oh.
did this. Was it just a cost issue? I mean, the darn thing costs so much money. It's hard to believe that. But for whatever reason, Apple didn't sell it. And yet my speculation is that they've had pushback from enough people that say that the solo knit band is the best one to wear, but we need some additional support
Oh.
over the head. And so whether it's the
Okay.
same thing that they had developed, my sense is that they took what they had been
Oh,
using in their
that's
lab and they came to Belkin and they say, Belkin, we trust you. You're a company that have worked with us in the past
right.
and things like
That's
this.
right.
By the way, Belkin is no longer an independent company. You know who they're owned by now? They are owned by Foxconn, which is the same company that
Ho
manufactures iPhones and
ho.
stuff like that. So
Okay.
Apple has a
Yeah.
very close relationship with this company.
Very
And they said,
interesting.
Belkin, we would here's the strap that we were using in our lab. We want you to make something just like this. We're going to work with you behind the scenes. And whatever you come out with, we will sell it in the Apple Store. These
We'll
products are
support it.
now
Right. Right.
available in the Apple Store.
Wow.
So that's my theory. Now, maybe Belkin decided on their own to make a case, or maybe Apple told Belkin it would be nice to have a smaller travel case. That one I don't know quite as much about, but that's my theory. So I have ordered one of these Belkin straps. They're $50. They're not cheap, but I'm just very curious about it. And it's going to be a few weeks before mine arrives, but it was nice to be able to go to the Apple Store and order it through there, and we'll see. So again, I don't feel like I'm someone who necessarily needs the strap, but I will see what it's like to try it. But this is one of these interesting examples of I think this is Apple working with a third party company that they feel comfortable giving all of the specs to and sharing their
Yeah.
ideas. And so, it's not quite an Apple co-branded product, but I suspect it's something very close to that.
Close enough. Well, we're going
Yeah.
with that theory because I like that.
Hmm.
I like going with that aspect. Well, the Vision Pro is one of Apple's brand new products that you can get, but there are many people apparently that would like to buy Apple's very old products. What a fun story that you leaked to today. 23 years of the iPod, and I like how you said it in your post today. Yes, you said iPod. How Elite Obsolete Electronics, that's a company, keeps the music playing. I just want to subscribe and buy something from this gentleman because I just love what he's doing. You could probably tell the story a little bit better here. For this is also from Bradley Chambers from 9 to 5 Mac, that he literally buys refurbished or refurbishes old iPods on his own and then resells them, and he can't keep them in stock. This story was just so brilliant to me.
Yeah, I mean, you said that Obsolete Electronics, great company name, and it is technically a company,
It is
but this is
beautiful.
one guy. This is one guy in a garage. I think his name is Austin Lucas, and
That's
he just
right.
buys on eBay and places like that in bulk these old iPods, many of which have broken screens and batteries that are about to bulge. But he basically dissects them and takes apart, and he's able to put together both to make sort of refurbished iPods for people who really want that experience, and in some cases even improve them because he can make the case is different and etching and stuff like that. And so
Right.
it's a fun article. He also has some YouTube videos and stuff that he has.
Love
It's
this.
it's some fun stuff. And in my mind, the iPhone is such a superior music player, but I can understand that there are some people that there's just something about having your songs and your
Oh
playlists
yeah.
on a standalone
Oh
device
yeah.
that's not gonna bother you with the phone call or anything else. It's just gonna and so it's nice to know that there are people out there that are still working on this old technology. It's a fun story.
Well, I liked one of the places in here, I guess either in his story, maybe in the story from Bradley Chambers, that rung true with me. Those of us that have been doing iTunes from the beginning and we have iPods, I remember literally having my entire music library from my iTunes connected or
Me too.
synced to my iPod. Exactly, Jeff. To where like that was it. Like that was my entire library carrying around. Now, this is obviously before Spotify and streaming services, which is pretty much what I rely on today. But there is that nostalgia that I miss a little bit, Jeff. And in fact, I still have an old iPod that I remember I put all my Christmas music just on that iPod so that during the holidays I would just pull that out, and instead of like mixing in regular music with my Christmas music on my Spotify, playlist or so, I would just use that iPod. And so I still have that. It still works. It still boots up. And I'm just thrilled to know that there's a resource here. I mean, I love his website. You can go in. He's got all of these old iPods, iPod Classic, the Nano, the Mini, the Touch, you name it. You can go in and he's got some of them for sale, and they're not very expensive on here. Here's
Yeah.
the iPod Touch 5th generation for $40 that you can purchase from him. I mean, this is just really cool. I just love the fact that there's a resource there for that. And good
Me
job,
too.
Mr. Lucas. Keep going on that. Well, let's talk passwords now. This is a nice story that you linked to today from Ryan Christoffel, again from 9 to 5 Mac. Apple Passwords app won me over with this one unique feature. I'll let you tell it because I felt the exact same thing that you put in your post today. I do
Mhm.
this already with one password, and I feel like I do it better in one
Yeah.
password.
So that's the thing, sharing passwords is what we're talking about here. And in one password, and I suspect that the same is true for other ones I don't use, like LastPass and stuff. They have the ability that you can, either pay for a single user account, or you can pay a little bit more for like a family account, family and friends account, and you can have multiple people work together. So for me, I've
Right.
got a family of four, my wife and my two teenagers, and we all have a family account. And so many of my
Correct. Right.
passwords, of course, are
Same.
unique to me. But then there are other things that maybe it's, the family Netflix password that I want to share there. And it's very easy to decide which vault I put it in. Do I put it in the Jeff
Yes.
Richardson vault, or do I put it in the everyone vault, or do
Same.
I put the
Right.
one for just me and my wife vault? And I mean, that password sharing is such a useful feature. And it's not just passwords. It's even things
Oh,
like
so good.
credit card numbers. For example, my
That's right.
credit card, my kids have like a version of my credit card. It's my account, but it's got different numbers on it. And so there's a
Right.
place in one password to put credit cards, but like I have one that's the one that my daughter uses, which is in the vault that both me and she and my wife have access to. So if you ever need to get the verification number or whatever else. So
Sure. It's
I
all
love
right
this
there.
feature. So
Same.
back to what Ryan's talking about. In the new Apple app called Passwords, it has a slightly different twist on sharing. Yes, you can have sharing within your family if people are part of your Apple ID family that you have that you share like songs and apps and stuff with. That's one thing, but it also has the ability to create this little bundle. He has a name for it here and I forget what it's called, that
Shared
you can,
group.
a
Yeah.
shared group, and you can say, I want these 5 people to have this password, and it can be people that are not
Right.
part of your,
Right.
quote unquote family that you're sharing, that are part of your Apple ID and shared credit card, but like maybe somebody you work with, or somebody, if you have a project that you're working on with a friend, and you can put passwords in there and share it with people in a secure way. And so I can understand Ryan's post saying that's a unique feature and that's cool. For me, however, I guess I still think of passwords as being an inherently private thing, and there's not many
Yeah.
circumstances in which I would want to share a password. There are a few, like as an
Right.
attorney, there are some websites that I might have access to. Like I have my login for the Louisiana Supreme Court when I file an appeal brief there, that I
Right.
will sometimes share with my secretary because she is handling the final preparation of the brief and she's going to file it under my name.
Sure.
So I understand that there are circumstances like that where you might share a password with someone, but it's not something that I do very often at all. I mean, outside of that work example, I can't think of any time. I mean, Brett, you and I are good friends, but no offense, but I can't think of a single
Yep.
password I need to share with you.
Yep. Agreed.
So
Right.
those sorts of things. So, and of course, even as I say that out loud, I suppose you and I have a podcast that has a password that we both have access to. So maybe I've disproved my own rule. So, but anyway, it's interesting for him to point out that this is a unique feature that I'm not aware of other password managers having. So.
It makes me think a little bit more of exactly what we were talking about with the Pixelmator app. Like 1Password has been around for so long and it has been so beloved by most of the
Mhm.
Apple heads, although today I use it on my Windows machine and other places
Me
as well
too.
because it went cloud-based on that. But it's just one of these things, like whereas we talked about Pixelmator that was separate, Apple acquired it, there are these other apps that I can't imagine not using on my Apple devices. 1Password would be one of those, even though there's a password app. But on the flip side, there's always been a calendar app in Mac and on the iPhone and the iPad. But so many people that you and I know, including ourselves, we use Fantastical. Like there's other apps like that are still kind of floating out there that either Apple has not acquired or they just know that most people are going to be using that. I haven't taken the time, to be fair, to use this password app that's kind of built into Mac and iPhone. There's always been the password saving feature, or for a long time it's been this password saving
The
feature.
keychain, yeah.
But yeah, and I know that in iOS 18 they came out with the passwords app, and it's you and I have talked about this. It's the default. It's what most people can use. It's better than not using anything. But
Right.
I just continue to keep thinking, Jeff, just like hearing you talk about 1Password, exactly the way that we use it. I have a vault that just for me and my wife, for me and my wife and my son, for me and my wife and my daughter. I mean, well, I just have different ones, and it's so easy to collect all of that. And I like the fact that it's shared that way, so that if one of us makes an update to it, then everybody gets access. Because I think
Right.
Ryan talked about you can still share a password, like a one-time share. Like I can text my wife a password that may only be in my vault, but it's only good, that link is only good for a little bit. Like you can share that and it's all encrypted and everything. And maybe
Hmm.
this is within the Passwords app. We have seen improvements on the Passwords app that Apple has continued to put in. Maybe it'll be a viable competitor to the 1Password app that I can't live without in my world today. And will Apple stop at some point and know, like, hey, whatever, if you want more than this, you're going to go to 1Password. But if you're
Hmm.
happy with just some of the basics and the defaults, then you can stay right here with us. Only the time will tell, I guess, on something like that. But I'm glad that if you are using Apple Passwords, please think about using the shared groups, because I think it's a great way to be able to keep things a little more secure. Where are you at? Let's do a quick
Where
where are
you
you at
at?
segment, because this one it's a little it's a little different than the ones that we used to go. This one you don't actually aren't trying to track the iPhone because pretty much everybody can see it. You just can't pick it up.
And the picture is 1,000 words here, and the picture you
I
just showed on
love
the
this.
screen for people that are listening to the audio version, you got to go look at the link.
Yes, this is fantastic. So tell us what happened here. I think I just breezed through the story. This is in Apple
Yeah,
Insider from Malcolm Owen.
I didn't get deep on it, but apparently somebody in the UK who had something to do with an ice skating rink, either on accident or because he thought it was a joke, we don't know, put he had borrowed his daughter's iPhone for that day because for whatever reason he didn't have his, and it ended up in the bottom of what is now covered with many layers of ice, inches thick of
Yeah.
ice that people ice skate on. And because it's ice is clear, of course, you can look in there and you can very clearly see the iPhone with the pink cover on it and her iPhone, and apparently they can't dig it out because they say that that would destroy the integrity of the ice skating
Of the
rink.
rest of the
So
ice, right?
it's just got to stay there for the next couple of months. And so anytime his daughter and her friends go ice skating, like there's, I don't know what the daughter's name is.
Can
There's
see.
Sally's phone, let's skate over Sally's phone. I can only imagine like the looks that my daughter would give me if I told her, I'm going to freeze your phone for the next couple of months so
Right.
that you can't use it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that would go over like a lead balloon.
Yeah, she's got apparently the skating rink will be deconstructed after January the 5th. So
there you go, right around the corner.
who knows? I mean, we know that the iPhone has survived being in a lake. It has survived being dropped from a plane. So we'll get to see after January 5th. Hopefully, Malcolm will report back to us. Is the iPhone still working after being frozen in the tundra of an ice skating rink? Does it still have battery after that? I just think that was so great. I just that'll be fun to kind of follow up on.
Inquiring minds want to know. Yes, indeed.
Last little story here. It's a little sad and bittersweet. Some of you may remember. Oops, I think we got a wrong story here. This was a link I think that you had in New York Times. Here, I'll bring it up again. Maybe you can tell the story on that. Some of us remember of a certain vintage, a service called AOL.
Yes,
and I remember my father used it a long time, Jeff. Maybe you have people in your family that were using it as well. When it turned on and when it connected, it would say, what was it? Welcome. We all recognize you've got mail. And then I remember at the very end, when you signed off, it would say goodbye. And it was just kind of a unique voice. But the man behind that voice passed away this past week.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time when many people equated America Online with the internet. I remember back in the 90s, there were people in my family, they didn't even know there was a distinction between AOL and the internet. That was the same thing.
That was my dad too.
So it's hard to imagine nowadays because it's been so long now. But that voice was iconic. I mean, everyone knew that voice. I mean, so iconic
everyone knew
that Tom Hanks made a movie called You Got Mail.
It was a movie, exactly.
Everybody knew what you were referring to because it was just such part of the popular culture. Maybe the quote unquote kids today don't remember that as much, but those of us that are older certainly do. So, and it was an interesting story here in the New York Times about him because his name was Elwood Hughes Edwards Jr. And it said that he lived in Maryland and his wife worked for a company called Quantum Link, which I remember because I used Quantum Link, gosh, way back when. We're talking about the 80s.
Wow.
And that was the precursor to America Online. It also had a connection to Apple's eWorld, if you want to get into all that history. But apparently someone who worked for the company, they had this idea of making the service seem more personable by digitizing the voice. And so she said, oh, my husband does commercial voiceovers and stuff, so why not use him? So apparently he got paid $200 to record these lines. And, for only $200, there were times when there's a citation in here that there were times that like every minute his voice was being heard millions of times around the world or something like that, just because AOL was so popular.
Mail.
So, if you're going to have, something in your life that you're going to be known around the world for, why not something like this? And something as happy as, welcome and you've got mail. So anyway, this is a nice little walk down memory lane to think about that.
It says he scribbled the announcements, welcome, you've got mail, files done, I remember that one, and goodbye, on a piece of paper and recorded them into a cassette deck in his living room. That's so brilliant. Well, rest in peace, Mr. Edwards. You've touched many, 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 many millions of people that you just probably don't even know from just a little simple recording on there. Thank you very much. In the know.
In the know.
It is getting close to travel time here, at least here in the United States, with Thanksgiving coming up and people are talking about this. I saw this hack. I call it a hack. I just think it's just a nifty little tip. If you're going to be traveling and flying, there are several flights like FlightAware or apps like FlightAware, for example, that you can track flights on. I've talked several times about an app called Flighty that I use constantly, and even my wife uses the free version because then she can track my flights, whether they're delayed or when they're coming in, if she has to come pick me up at the airport or something like that. I travel quite a bit, so the Flighty app to me is an absolute must-have investment. But if you don't travel quite as much, but you still need to track your flights, and maybe you don't want to get an app, you don't want to have to go through that bother. Just get the flight number of the flight that you need to watch and text it to yourself or to a family member. And this mostly works on iPhone. There is a way that you can get it to work on the Android as well. But if you text it, the iMessages app on the iPhone recognizes that is a flight number. It makes it into a link that you can tap on. And when you tap on it, there will be an option there that says preview flight. And if you tap on that, you get basically all of the flight info that you need. It will tell you when it's departing, if it's delayed, if it's on time. It'll even tell you the duration and the baggage claim number, where to pick this up. So you can text yourself your flight number, and all you have to put in is like United in the number, or even UA in the number, or AA for American Airlines in the number. You just simply text it to yourself. And again, you can text it to family members as well. They will get into that as a text message, tap on the link, tap preview flight, and it'll just come up with like an info card that will give you all the information that you need about that flight. I had no idea that was built into the Messages app. I think this was on a TikTok earlier this year or something, and I just kind of came across it, Jeff. And I just think it's absolutely brilliant. It's an easy way for people to be able to track their flights. And, there's just no excuse to not know when something's going to be delayed or something like that. And it's important to have all that information, especially in our busy travel season. So that's my little tip today. If you travel several times, like once a month or so, in your life, invest in the Flighty app. That's really the best way to go. But if it's just an occasional flight and you need to keep that, you need to track that. All you have to do is, again, just go into the text and like you could type in. I did this earlier today and text it to myself, AA for American Airlines 5350. That's all you got to tap. Comes in the text message, and just tap it and go to preview flight. So keep that in mind in your travel season for this year.
Yeah, that's a good tip. It's an example of something that Apple has long called Apple data detection. And it's things like if Apple sees something in something like Messages or somewhere else that is formatted as a phone number, they'll make it with a hyperlink that you can tap on it and you can dial the phone number. If it sees something that it understands to be an address, you could tap on it and you can open it up in the Maps app and look at the address. And this is yet another example that I have to admit, I was not aware of it, and it makes it so easy. You just say, Delta 1234, and someone can just tap it and get all your flight information. So it's a nice way to share things with someone. It's a cool tip. And it just, Apple data detectors has always made our life easier. And I'm thrilled to be reminded of this great example of it. Great tip. For my tip of the week, I decided to sort of step back and go a little broader. As you said, we are getting into travel season. And so this is the perfect time to be thinking about your apps for that. And I wanted to focus a little bit on apps. We've talked about them in the past, but this is a great time to do so again. Flighty and TripIt, which are sort of my two favorite apps for traveling. So let me start with Flighty. Flighty is the one that sort of everything that we just described, but goes to the next level. When you have your own flights in there, it will give you amazing information. Of course, the basic stuff, like what time do you leave? What time do you arrive? But it also has fantastic information on flight delays. And I wanted to particularly call out that just a few months ago in August of this year, and as I think about it, I have not flown since August, although my wife has, of this year, to use this, but they now are using a combination of data from the aviation authorities, both in the United States and Europe, and other information to track late aircraft arrivals. They're also monitoring congestion at airports, and they're taking all of that data and they're combining it with Apple Intelligence, including artificial intelligence, including the history of flight patterns. And as a result, they now conclude that they are 95% accurate in predicting delays.
That's amazing.
Now, you may say, hey, I don't need this because my own airline will tell me, hey, your flight's been delayed 30 minutes. And that is true. However, with this new technology, as Flighty says, and I've experienced this before, they will tell you often long before the airline does about a delay. Also, they will tell you more accurate information because your airline might say we have a 30-minute delay. How many times have we been there that you have a 30-minute delay, and then at the end of the 30 minutes, you're told we have another 30 minutes, where it's even more
That's
time.
right.
Whereas Flighty says that because of their use of historical data and artificial intelligence, they can tell you up front, this
They
looks
will
like it's going to
predict
be a
it.
2 hour delay, or
Oh
this looks
yeah.
like the flight's going to be canceled. And I will tell you that it can be just useful, especially if you got to get
Oh,
somewhere in a rush. It's just so useful. So the Flighty
critical.
service, there is a very limited free version, but it's $50 to get all of the features. And I really do. I really think it's great. Flighty is nice also because it syncs with TripIt, which I'm going to talk about in a second. So it can
Yeah.
automatically get your flight information in there. Or if you want to track a friend's flight, it is so easy. You just, tap on friend's flight and you put, start typing the word Delta or American Airlines, and it will pre-populate it and then put in the flight number or put in the date, and it has everything there for you. You can also get great information like where is my plane? So you're sitting there and you know that you're waiting. We have this delay of the plane from Cincinnati. Where is it right now? And you can see in real time exactly where it is. And then of course when you land, it tells you here's the gate you're going to. Here is the baggage claim number and stuff like that. So lots of great information that it provides you. The other app that I also really like is TripIt, which there's a fantastic free version. I love TripIt because it can manage all of your flight information, your plane, your hotel, your restaurants, everything about your trip, your vacation, your business trip. It's a central place that you could put everything in one location, which is just really useful. And I love that because that way everything I need is right there on my app at my fingertips, ready to use. But if you pay $50 a year for TripIt Pro, you get some additional features, many of which are
Yeah.
the same as Flighty, including predictions of airline delays. It can help you find alternative flights. You can store documents associated with your trip. Now, the free version lets you store 3 documents, but the paid version can store up to 25 documents to have everything here in one place.
Okay.
It's got other little
Yep.
bells and whistles. Now, I will tell you, I spend $100 between these two apps every year, which is a lot, especially because I don't travel nearly as much as you do, Brett.
Right.
And there is overlap in the features. Don't get me wrong, but I have had specific times in my life where the TripIt app has just completely saved my bacon. Things like a hurricane has been coming to New Orleans. I've gotten advance notification. I was
Oh
able
yeah.
to book my own flight and get home before my colleagues that were on the same plane flights even learned that there was
Uh-huh.
a
I
delay in the
remember
first
that.
place. And it is just life. It can be life changing. And we all know that it's the biggest hassle. One of the biggest hassles of flying is the flight delays and stuff like that. And so this puts the power in your hands. So I think if you have to pick one, I would use the free version of TripIt and pay for Flighty, the $50.
That's what
But
I
if
do.
you
That's
want to
right.
go a little
Yep.
further, pay for both. That's up to you. If it wasn't for the fact that TripIt Pro has been so specifically helpful to me in the past, I almost feel like a loyalty to the app because it has
Yeah.
saved me in
I
the
hear you.
past that I don't want to stop paying
Yeah.
for it. But I probably don't need to. The free version of TripIt would probably be enough along with the paid version of Flighty. But if you have these tools in your arsenal, you will be just in such great place.
You're really good. It saves my bacon many times, just like what you said. Absolutely. And I do the free version of TripIt. I used to pay for it, but I'm with you. I might go back to paying for it just because having all of that access is great. TripIt is only like my itinerary. It just captures all of that information. But Flighty has been, again, it has truly saved my bacon several times because I can already tell when something's going to be, delayed or confused, and I can get on the horn sooner than later.
Yeah. Last thing I was going to mention today, as we talk about these travel things with the travel season starting up, you and I, Brett, recorded an episode of this podcast. It was episode 58,
Yeah.
called A Treasure Trove of Travel Tips and Trinkets. Great title. People should
That's
know that
good. We
Brett
did
is the
good.
one that comes up with 99% of the titles for our podcasts, and they are always very, very cute and sometimes alliterative, as in this case. But that episode, although we recorded it 2 years ago, I think it still holds up.
Oh,
It
these
has
are
a lot of tips in
good.
it.
Right.
It's
I
things like
see.
travel chargers and travel apps. Now, some of like the specific gadgets that we recommend 2 years later, there's now like perhaps a different version. So maybe the specific
Right.
product
Right.
that we recommended, you might want to get the next version of that product. But it still does a great job of giving recommendations of travel gadgets that you can use, such as that 12 South Airfly, which is so fun because you can plug it
Yeah,
in
that's
to the
good.
airplane. And then if you want to watch the video screen on the back of the seat in front of you, you can use your AirPods. It creates Bluetooth for that. So that's a nice one. The version that I own, they have like a new a more advanced version they sell now, but it does the exact same thing. Not very expensive. We have some digital media recommendations in here and more. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, this is if you're trying to get ready for travel and get yourself psyched up, we have some great recommendations in here.
I'm so glad you linked to that. That was episode 58, Jeff. We're on 171 today. So that's a while, but you're right. I looked at. I'm so glad you linked to it because I looked at these slides. I'm like, wow, like there really is some very good recommendations on here. So I'm glad you did, and I'll make sure that link is in the show notes from there as well. We should like update that and do that again. Maybe we will, but at least for now, folks, this is where you can go to get some updates and some ideas for your upcoming travel, if any of that is happening. Good luck watching the shows this weekend, everyone. Take a time, take some self-care time and watch a fun episode of Schmigadoon or Ted Lasso, and you can thank us later for that. Otherwise, we'll talk with you next week, Jeff. Thanks.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.